bwetyo bwetuleeta oludda olwo mu mbeera efaanana bwetyo kati nno nga bwe luli lunaku olwa Friday negatibwako munange Apollo Tusiime ne tuwayamu wano katono n'oluvannyuma n'abaako kyabatuusaako. Apollo webale kutwegattako mu Munyo Live.
Nange nsanyuse okubasanga
weewaawo embeera ogirabye bweri. Kakati tubadde tulaba wano abantu b'Kamwokya nga bagamba nti ate si bokka bakiikirira abalala bangi nti emirimu gyabagwako mu biseera bya COVID-19 mu mawanga agamu amawanga gasitulirako abantu bano ne gabayambako ebyokulya okupangisa ennyumba n'ebirala nga tebannafuna mirimu. Kakati abantu nga bano n'abali e Kamwokya n'awalala olowooza kiki bandyesigamye ku gavumenti nga balindirira ebeeko kye bayamba oba waliwo engeri endala gye bandiyambiddwamu?
Ndowooza bwe batuukidde okuvaayo mu kiseera kino nga tuli mu mwezi kati tugenda mu mwezi gwa munaana nga okuva COVID tusalako wano Uganda, ndowooza bamaze okulaba nga embeera lazima yandiba nga tejja kusoboka, tebajja kusobola kwewanirira bo nga bo. Bagambye nti bagezaako omulundi ogwasooka okusinkana oba okukwatagana ne gavumenti okulaba nga ebayambako, naye boolyawo ndaba nga kyekiseera gavumenti weba esobola
ebeeko engeri gyeyambamu abamu kubanga abamu oluusi ndowooza babaako engeri gye bakalubirirwa mugamba tebasobola kudda mu byalo tebayinaayo gye babeera ng'essubi lyonna lyabali mu mirimu awo. Webale kutwegattako Apollo Tusiime. Kakati twagala okubaleetera akaseera ensonga ezikwatagana n'eddembe ly'obuntu naddala mu biseera ebya kampeyini nga zino ezitandise okuyindiza obwa pulezidenti n'okutuukira ddala ku mitendera egy'enjawulo mu ggwanga. Apollo Tusiime byonna birinde agenda kubikuleetera mu kanyomero Limelight.
World over, the election period is always a delicate season. Stakes are always high, both for governments and citizens as well. Sometimes during this season, political interests and individual interests override national interests. This situation brings about confrontations between the state and politicians as the state swings in to restore order. Scuffles arise and tension is imminent. Sadly, it is the innocent citizens who find themselves at the center of these scuffles.
Simanyi nakikwatiddwa kubanga tuli mu ddembe eryaffe tukkirizibwa okwenyigira mu kulonda.
But elections are important because they facilitate the realization of the right of the citizens to participate in the affairs of governance as stipulated in Article 38 of the Constitution of Uganda, which highlights the right to vote, which is also expressly provided for under Article 59. Besides, the right to vote has a direct bearing on many other rights, including the right to expression, association, movement, assembly, and many others. But it is also the duty of all stakeholders, including the state, civil society organizations, and contending politicians, to ensure that human rights are preserved during the election period. Mechanisms must be put in place to ensure human rights are protected. That is why it is important to state at the outset that there is a particularly high level of legal protection for freedom of expression during election periods, and interference with the rights of citizens must be exceptional and subject to the strict limitations set out in the human rights law. All public bodies, including the central and local government, the criminal justice agencies, the courts, and the statutory bodies have positive obligation to protect key human rights and act compatible with them. But how far has the stakeholders in this human rights issue gone to execute this mandate? And this is the Limelight.
and welcome to this segment. It is the Limelight, and my name is Simapolo. Now, human rights are basic rights that belong to all of us simply because we are human. They embody key values in our society, such as fairness, dignity, equality, and respect. They are a means of protection for all of us. But in times when political tensions are high, these liberties are compromised and sometimes ignored. Lives are easily taken, the weak and innocent are downtrodden, and politicians seem not to care. Now, I would wish to bring in my expert at this time, and he happens to be a human rights advocate. Mr. Nicholas Opio is also the executive director for Chapter for Uganda, and is also its lead attorney. Chapter for Uganda is a civil rights charity working to defend civil liberties. He has won a recognition and recognition across the world, and I hope he's the better person to take us through the human rights and those probably that have been ignored. I want to cross over and bring in Nicholas Opio. Nicholas Opio, I hope you are live, and you are live. I want you please to tell us briefly, what are those human rights that are at stake around this time when we are in a political season?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I believe this is my maiden appearance on your esteemed television. So thank you very much for having me. I do not take it for granted. Secondly, let us just say that the exercise of election is perhaps the most important exercise in a democratic process. It is itself a process of exercising a person's right to vote. Voting as a franchise is a fundamental right in Article 59 of the Ugandan Constitution. So that very right and its exercise is in question every time we conduct election. Alongside the right to vote is the fundamental right of participation in one's governance. Because our Constitution opens with a very important article that says power belongs to the people, and the people shall decide how they shall be governed through regular, free and fair election. So the right to participate in one's government or one's governance, the right to choose our leaders, is also a right that becomes exceedingly important during election. Now, accompanying those two important rights that form the basis for election is the freedom to access information. Because the lifeblood, the thing that keeps a democratic process going, is the free exchange of ideas. It is a contestation of views. Now, for those contestations to play out in a healthy manner, people must have the right to receive information, to access information, to impart information to the public, to the voter, so that the voter's decision is based on an informed decision, a decision based on facts, based on views that have been shared. And so the right to access to information becomes important, and therefore access to the population by candidates, either by means of physical or other forms of contact, becomes an important ingredient for the success of any campaigns. Because those who contest for elections don't campaign to themselves, they campaign to voters who exercise their franchise through a vote and determine who leads them. But you also have other rights, like the freedom of speech, of expression, which includes the freedom of the media, because the media is the medium or the modicum for the transmission of ideas, for the sharing of views, and therefore it becomes important that media freedom is protected, especially in elections such as this time, which we are calling digital elections, where the media platforms are supposed to be the major platform for campaigns for candidates. So the right of the media, the freedom of expression, becomes exceedingly important. Additionally, the freedom of association, because people must associate. People come together, form political parties as a form of association to pursue a legal democratic objective. And so that freedom becomes exceedingly important for a successful conduct of elections. In fact, the measure for elections now has been the multiplicity of actors. Multi-party democracy has become a hallmark of the liberal democratic order, so that countries that allow for multi-party democracy or multi-party elections are seen as more democratic. And I can go on and on about rights, but also more important, the freedom from torture, the freedom from cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment, the right to life, that you cannot just shoot and kill people because you want to win an election. You cannot torture people because you want to win an election. And so there are a number of rights that become exceedingly important for conduct of election in any country.
From these other rights, we know the right to vote, right to life, freedom of expression and association and all those. Let's look at, for instance, the business community. Around this time of elections and campaigning, businesses are disrupted, and sometimes businessmen spend days or weeks with their shops closed. Let's talk about it. Isn't that some form of infringement on someone's right?
Times of elections should be a time for boom for businesses. People who are involved in printing, people involved in media, should be a time for making good business and lawful business. And so a chaotic election process, an election that is characterized by violence, disrupts the life of everybody, including people who are involved in business, who are conducting lawful business. And so I think that we must summon our collective commitment to ensuring that we conduct free, fair election, to allow people who are conducting business or are doing other things to be able to do it. In fact, a chaotic election is bad for business, both in terms of people who are doing local business in the country, but also for people who want to come and invest in this country. Investors make decisions to invest on a country, among other, on the ground for stability, predictability, for peace. Each time we see our streets in chaos, each time we have images of the army, the police shooting and killing people on the streets, or in fact, people burning tires on the streets, we are sending a message to investors, people who want to bring their money and employ it here, that the long-term investment in this country is a bad business decision. People who want to make long-term investments in the oil and gas sector, in our infrastructure, in green energy, will not want to come and invest in a country where you're not sure about a fair judicial process, you're not sure about an efficient public transport, you're not sure about a good workforce, or in fact, peace and stability. And so, images of violence disrupts local business, disrupts people's livelihoods, and in the long term, disrupts the economic development and foreign direct investment in our country. Anybody who cares about the economy should be working hard to avoid non-uniform individuals walking on the streets and shooting at people. We look like Somalia, like a failed state. We look like we're in a state of war. That is bad for business as it is bad for human life in this country.
About the incidents we have seen several times, but in recent, people who happen to be putting on some colors that are associated with some political groupings being manhandled, being harassed, and all of that. Isn't that one right that has been ignored, Mr. Nicholas?
Let's say this without flinching, that elections are about a contest of ideas. There are going to be differences of opinion, political opinion. And these differences will be expressed in the manner of our dressing, in the manner of our speech, in the songs we sing, the rallies we attend. That should not be a crime. It should not be a crime for a people power supporter to wear a red shirt or a red beret, because that's a manner of expression, it's a branding. It also should not be a crime for anybody to wear the yellow t-shirt of the NRM. And so any incidents in which individuals expressing themselves by showing support for their parties are being intimidated must be repudiated, must be completely condemned by all right-thinking members of our society. If we cannot tolerate people's ideas, clearly we are going into violence, because we are undermining the very essence of any election. The authorities must act resolutely on security officials beating and killing individuals for simply wearing opposition political colors. The authorities must also act resolutely on individuals who are simply beating up people on the streets of Kampala for wearing NRM colors. We must restore the rule of law and act fairly and evenly. Yes, sir.
I was asking, is the law clear about this? Because people have actually lost lives just because they wear some colors.
Look, the law does not outlaw wearing a political party regalia. Any attempt to try and make a political party regalia an unlawful attire has no basis in law. The UPDF attempt to gazette the red beret, the fashion itself, not just the insignia, is without legal basis. In the same way, the beating of people wearing yellow t-shirts in this country are unlawful. So the law does not stop you from wearing your party colors, your party regalia, and what the law does not outlaw, the law allows. And so it is clear that what is happening is extreme intolerance between the actors in this election of each other, so that anybody who is wearing yellow may not be able to go to some parts of the town, anybody wearing red, which is NUP, may not go in some parts of the town, or indeed risk being beaten and arrested by soldiers on the streets.
All right, Mr. Nicholas, probably another right that has been ignored. The right of access to information. You've talked about it. And we are in a season where we have actually received directives from the regulator of communications in this country, Uganda Communications Commission, to, directives that seem to be, curtailing live coverage of events, covering live events. I'm looking at it from another angle. I'm a viewer. I am a listener of some media seated in my home. If I am denied that right, I don't know, isn't it another violation of a right that has been ignored? Mr. Nicholas.
Beyond the violations of a right, the actions of the Uganda Communications Commission, as well as the actions of several government departments to intimidate the media, to suppress the media, to suffocate the space in the media for free exchange of ideas, undermines our democratic process. They are anti-democratic, and we must call it out for what it is. Unfortunately, agents of the state act like appendages of the NRM government. that they do everything in their power to make it inconvenient, if not impossible, for opposition views or dissenting views to have their day in the limelight, to be aired on TV, to be aired on radio, and yet at the same time allows the NRM free access to media houses. We must condemn this, because if the population does not have access to accurate and credible information, they cannot make good decisions about the election. How else would they elect their leaders? Many people in this country do not even know the manifestos of candidates. If these candidates are speaking, addressing a rally, or they are being mistreated, the population ought to know. Like the tagline for the New York Times says, democracy dies in darkness. That darkness can only be put away by a robust, independent media shining a light on the excesses in our society, but also giving a platform for people to be able to express themselves and be heard in the population. And so we must repudiate and condemn the actions of government agencies like UCC for being anti-democratic. The UCC has talked about minimum broadcasting guidelines. This minimum broadcasting guideline seems to be a shifting goalpost. Nobody knows definitively what it is. Somebody can be stopped from covering a live event because they look ugly, while another live event is being covered. Or it might be the same event by different media houses. One media house is allowed, one media is not allowed to do so. Real-time information has become important. And it is also a waste of their time, because in the era of mobile phones, of smartphones, citizens have become vigilant. Even if you shut out a media house, these things will be all over the internet, will be all over social media. So it is a worthless exercise that the Uganda Communications Commission is engaging in blocking live broadcasting. I just need to have data, a smartphone, and social media page to broadcast from anywhere I want to. And so they must recognize the futility and the lack of usefulness, the lack of utility of their exercise, and allow the media to bring to the people live events. In fact, if any event is embarrassing, they should be addressing the reason why those events are embarrassing. If it is because the police is beating up people on the street, other than stop reporting, they must allow us to find out why the police is beating people and address that concern. Because if you don't address that concern, it is in one way or the other going to fester and cause problems for this country. The moment you shut people from sharing views and hearing accurate information, you're only breeding, you're sending people underground, what we used to call Radio Kabi, Radio Katwe. Rumors become the means for communication, and that can be a real security threat for our country.
Finally, Mr. Nicholas, we've talked about rights, but of course we know that around this political season, or after this political season, we will have people who will bear scars or who have lost their loved ones just because of a political season. I mean, the victims. Do we have structures? Are there structures for these people who have, whose rights have been violated, to be addressed? I mean, in the near or distant future, are there those structures? Leave alone the justice, the criminal justice system. Are there other structures from where their grievances can be addressed?
Well, first of all, nobody should die in this country exercising a democratic freedom. Nobody should be maimed for simply exercising their rights. The fact that they are being maimed for protesting, for participating in election itself is something we must all collectively condemn, regardless of who is involved. Now, secondly, it is important that we must document meticulously these cases of human rights violations. It may appear a mundane and useless thing at the moment, but I can tell you today is 75 years since the beginning of the Nuremberg trials. Perpetrators of war crimes, of crimes during the First and Second World War, are still being tried up until now. people who perpetrated violence in Rwanda in 1994. You had recently a man called Felician Mbuga was arrested in France, are still being arrested. This would never have been possible if somebody did not document cases of human rights violation. So the first thing is to be able to document them. Document the persons involved, the police officers, the army, the soldier, the LDU, the CMI operative. Just document it, because at some point P and sometime T, these people are going to be brought to justice now or sometime in the future. The second thing is that there is social accountability. We must turn this to the people of our country, because the people who are shooting and killing us on the streets are our sons and daughters. They're not foreigners. They come from our communities. Let's collectively engage in what we call social accountability. Social accountability is rejecting a place in our community for people who are killing and shooting people on the street.
Mr. Nicholas,
for people who are abusing human rights in this country.
Our time is running out, and in just one statement, I would wish you to tell us where these people who have been aggrieved, people who have been beaten on the streets and they cannot actually pinpoint who beat them, who harassed them, where can they run to? I mean, do you have a desk anywhere? I mean, is it anywhere anyway? Just in 1 minute.
The Uganda Human Rights Commission has the mandate to investigate human rights violations. Everybody who is deployed on the street and are beating people can be known by their command, so their commanders are known. But there are also several other non-governmental organizations that are seeking justice for victims of crime. So go to them, come to Chapter 4 Uganda. If we can help you, we will help you. The National Coalition for Human Rights Defenders, Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum. There's so many NGOs out there who are working hard to ensure that people get justice, but in many cases even get reparations. So don't despair.
Nicholas Opio, our time is fast spent, and of course we thank you for the deliberations and highlighting some of these human rights. We appreciate your time, and we of course appreciate the time of our viewers who have been of course closely following us from the start up to this point. Limelight is coming to a close. We have been hearing from Mr. Nicholas Opio. He's a human rights advocate, and he is the executive director for Chapter 4 Uganda, a civil rights charity working to defend civil liberties. We must thank you, and Limelight comes to you every Friday in the evening news. We'll be back next Friday. My name is Tsimapolo. We are going into MECG. Do not dare touch your remote. Good evening and good night.